Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with that. I welcome all of you tonight. I apologize for the tardiness, but we were in executive session discussing some items, and now we're here so we can get started with our board meeting. With that being said, I will ask that Ms. Glenda Marson-Fair lead us in prayer, and if we can, may we all stand.
Thank you. Let us pray. Dear God, tonight we express the gratitude we feel for giving each of us the opportunity to make a difference in the life of a child. Continue to guide and direct each decision throughout this school year as we continue to advance public education and model positive leadership throughout this community. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing. I would like to ask Zuri to come to the podium. And let me just tell you a little bit about Zuri. Zuri is a fifth grader at Mitchell Road Elementary School. Even though she's been at Mitchell Road only 2 years, Zuri has already become a leader for her peers. She serves as a newspaper reporter for the school's news show, bringing poise and clarity to the entire school audience. Zuri also looks for ways to show kindness to others, and she is a model student ambassador for Mitchell Road's new Capturing Kids' Hearts program. Zuri, would you be so kind in leading us in the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Zuri, if you will stay where you are, and let me bring your parents, because we want Mitchell Road Elementary to be very happy. We want them to see a picture of this. Come on up here, Mr. Royster. Dr. Royster, if you could be in this picture as well. Mom, brothers and sister, superintendent, and we can Photoshop your dad. I just heard her say your dad's going to be disappointed. Okay, and we're going to get you right here, and you want to come in. All right.
1, 2, 3, right there. 1, 2, 3.
All right, Zuri.
Thank you.
Good luck in school, and if y'all need anything, you come see Dr. Royster. Very nice. Okay. Okay, so that was 1.01. We will now move to adoption of consent calendar.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move that we adopt the consent calendar as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, are there any questions? Hearing no questions, all in favor, please address by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carries, and the consent calendar has been approved. Thank you. 3.01, appearance of visitors. There are no visitors tonight, so we will move on. But before we do, I'd like to thank Ms. Bush for her beautiful flowers, as she always keeps us in style every month. And I'd like to thank Billy Bush as well, because he comes in. Well, thank you, Ms. Bush, and I always stop to smell the roses, and every time I do, I think of you. Thank you so much. 4.0, Dr. Royster, Superintendent's Report.
Very briefly, I don't have a regular superintendent's report tonight, but I do want to make some introductions of personnel that were approved earlier, in fact, before school started, but for different reasons were not able to be with us to stand and be recognized so that you might see them. Some of you have by now already met them. But we do have with us tonight V. Popat, the director of the Fine Arts Center. V. And beside him, coming to us, having previously served as a middle school principal with it, but also with a background in jazz as well. And he's already hit the ground running and has been at the Fine Arts Center since July. And we also want to recognize tonight our newly appointed Assistant Director of the Fine Arts Center, Casey Cotter. Welcome to both of you. Congratulations on your new role. Both of them are new to Greenville County Schools, and we're glad to have you here and look forward to your leadership at the Fine Arts Center. We also have an assistant principal at Tanglewood Middle School, Damon Officer. I believe I see him back there. Damon? We'll come up and get your picture. We welcome Damon back to the district, who's with us before and left, and we are now delighted to have him back in a leadership role at Tanglewood Middle School.
Oh, good. Okay, so I just want you to know that we're excited about the Fine Arts Center, as we are Tanglewood. But let me just brag that you will see me downtown, just with a group of students in various areas downtown, just strumming and playing and getting the kids involved wherever he goes. They're everywhere. He's everywhere. He is such an advocate for our Fine Arts Center, and I am just so excited and appreciative, and thank you all three for being here tonight. I'll be over there within the next week to see y'all, okay? Thank you so much, B. All right, Section 5.0, South Carolina Champions for Education Award nomination. Okay. Let me see where we are. 4.1. I do not have that. Do you have that one, Lisa? Okay, so the recommended motion from the Committee of the Whole is to approve the nomination of First Presbyterian Church for the South Carolina School Board Association's Champions for Public Education Award. Coming from the Committee of the Whole, it needs no second, but are there any questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please address by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carries, and the nomination for First Presbyterian Church for the South Carolina School Board Champions for Public Education Award has been passed. Thank you. 5.02, property for Fort Shoals School.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion that we defer this item to the Committee of the Whole so that we could get a little bit more information about the appraisals.
Okay. Is there a second? Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, there is no second. Yes, Ms. Wells?
There's an October 8th special call meeting that I think the intent
Yeah.
is to defer to the special call meeting on October 8th.
Thank you.
As opposed to the committee of the whole.
Yes.
So
we
what
make
is your
that-
motion?
I would like to defer the item to the special called meeting on October 8th in order to get more information about the value and the appraisals.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second.
Any questions?
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Meek.
after we reviewed this at length in executive session, I really see no reason to defer it. I think the outcome will be the same, and I don't think I'll say any more on it, but I'll vote in a negative on this motion.
So, okay, any discussion? Any further discussion? Ms. Dr. Ball O'Connor.
I had hoped that we would have the discussion after getting a little bit more information, but if that is not clear, then I would like to specify further what my concerns are. And in particular, we have two different appraisals that are very dissimilar.
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
We're
sir,
getting close
Mr.
to
Meek.
executive session content.
Okay, do I have a motion to go into executive session?
No.
Just go into executive
No,
session?
ma'am, no. My
No.
comment was we're getting close to executive session
Oh, okay.
I
content.
agree.
Okay, so Dr. Ball-O'Connor, can you,
I was trying not to. Let's see. I believe that we established that there are many unanswered questions for some of us, and I would respectfully ask my colleagues, since we are well within our time limits without extending anything that causes any negative result, if there are several of us that would like to add some additional information in order to be comfortable with the values that we are talking about for this potential transaction, that we be given the courtesy to get that additional information. Otherwise, I would have to vote against this altogether. Thank you.
okay, any other discussion? All right, we will vote on the motion to defer this item
Roll call.
until the special call meeting October 8th in order to get more information about the appraisals. Roll call.
Mrs. Bush? Yes. Mr. Shanley?
No.
Ms. Goodman Caldwell? Yes. Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Meek?
No.
Mrs. Morrison Fair? Yes. Dr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Saylor?
No.
Mr. Sutter?
No.
Mrs. Wells? Yes. Mrs. Dennis?
No.
Six, five, no.
6-5 no, the motion fails.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I wish to make a motion.
Wait a minute, is that 6 of us? Is that,
Six,
that's
five.
11?
But
Oh,
that,
Joy's not here.
so
Okay.
it's just
Okay.
Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Meek.
I wish to make a motion to approve the purchase of 24.956 acres as depicted in the survey dated July the 1st, 2019 for Fork Shoals School.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, there's a second by Mr. Saylors. Any discussion? Ms. Dr. Ball-O'Connor.
yes, I am not comfortable with this as, which is difficult to avoid executive session content. So please feel free to call me out if I get there. I'm not intending to do that, but I think if we're going to have a discussion about it, and some of us were not comfortable with the numbers that we got and didn't feel that the appraisals had taken into account all relevant information. And then other board members are going to say, well, let's go ahead and buy it anyway without that information that would have made several of us more comfortable. Then I think it's only fair to state the reasons that for the discomfort. And that is that we have a lease for 18 more years that we would like more information about the effects on that lease
Madam
on the
Chairman,
appraisal.
Yes, sir.
I think we're getting into executive session more than we need to be.
You don't think
If
so?
we need to do that, we need to do an executive session.
Why is that executive session?
I'm going to refer to the council.
I believe the lease is public knowledge. I believe the reference to that is okay, but more detail I would be concerned about
Okay.
beyond that.
So that it is about that we did not feel that appropriate consideration had been given. So because of that, I will vote no on this, but I would be comfortable first offering a substitute motion, which is that given that we have two appraisals that were significantly different from one another, am I able to say by how much?
No.
Okay, significantly different from one another. I would not be comfortable paying anything more than the higher of the two appraisals obtained by the district. I still think that is a very...
This is a motion.
Yes.
So you're adding more to this?
No,
or
I'm
is
sorry.
that
I'm just
your
making the
motion?
motion. You're right. You
Okay.
did not ask me to discuss my motion. Apologize.
Um,
So the motion would be, instead of accepting
The substitute motion.
the substitute motion, instead of accepting the price as is, that the price would not be anything greater than the higher of the two appraisals obtained by the district.
Okay. Is there a second?
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir?
There's a motion and a second
you
now.
asked Mr. Webb, but I'm not sure that's a substitute motion, more like an amendment to it.
I'd be okay with whatever.
Amendment to your motion?
Amendment to my motion. It seems more like that's what it should be, but Mr. Webb's the parliamentarian, not me.
I'm not feeling that, but go ahead, Doug. Mr. Webb?
Yeah, I think the question is how closely aligned would this motion be to the original motion? And I think it's right in the middle. I think I could live with a substitute motion.
Okay.
Substitute motion. So now, is there a second to the substitute motion?
Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell.
Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell? Any discussion on the substitute motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr.
May I
Ball-O'Connor?
speak to the substitute? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Again, without the benefit of further clarification that would have given us what I consider a more thorough, accurate, and fair understanding of the value, had we focused on the current commitment of 18 more years for the lease that we already have, then I would say the only way I could get comfortable supporting this is that, given we have two dramatically different appraisals, I'd be glad to accept the highest one, which is, by everyone's understanding, much higher than the other appraisal. But because of that discrepancy and not having full information about the effects on the appraisal that the lease for 18 years may have, I would not be comfortable paying more than the higher of the two appraised values that we got, which I still think is a very generous price under the circumstances.
Thank you. Mr. Shamley?
Yeah, I would say that in response, ordinarily, all things being equal, if there was nothing else out there, you would say naturally that you would want to pay the lowest appraisal that you could get for the property. But I think we also have to take into consideration that there's another appraisal out there. There's a third appraisal. And that's the appraisal of our staff that has looked at this and determined that this is a fair value for this property based on future events, based on everything that is taken into account, and to some extent even based on the existing lease, which is probably worth somewhere in the time value of money of today, somewhere in the range of $50,000, $60,000, whatever. Bottom line is, for $20,000 difference between the two, I can get comfortable with that if our building folks think that's a fair price for us based on what we anticipate we may need in the future, and additionally based on what the value of this property may be in the future if we seek to purchase it later. So with that in mind, I would suggest that we stick with the original motion and go. It's just $20,000 difference. I mean, I don't know that we need to, burn the house down for a $20,000 difference. Granted, that's $20,000, but I think based on everything that I've been able to hear, based on the fact that we have to have this property part of it for at least 18 years and may well need it well beyond that, at which time, if you take into consideration the increase in values of property, I suspect we're doing okay at the price that we've been quoted at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Shamley. Okay. Next, I have Mrs. Michelle Goodwin-Caldwell.
Yes, I agree with Crystal, with all things being considered, and that they didn't have all of the information about the lease being on there and the wetlands on the property. I think that we do need more information before we approve this, this purchase. I agree with Cristobal O'Connor that we need more information in order for us to approve this purchase using public funds. You don't want to pay over premium. You want to go with what the appraiser says. So I agree with Dr. Cristobal O'Connor that I need more information in order for me to be comfortable with us purchasing this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell. Ms. Wells?
Yes, I think we tried our best to talk about this and come to some conclusion in executive session, and I guess maybe we should spend a few more minutes or kind of go back in. But I have a couple of other questions that are related, but I think they're public information. What's the current dollar amount we have in our long-range facility, our capital budget for property acquisition right now?
Ms. Stack look for that, but I believe it's about, generally speaking, it's around a $1.5 million line item.
And what are the other properties, what other schools are we thinking we're going to need property for? So that where we know that we need to, because we set aside that money, do we typically have a list of targeted areas we need to purchase?
Right now, the foreseeable future long-range facility plan, I don't think through the 2021 year there is, at least at this point, a site acquisition need. Ms. Farley?
Dr. Worcester, that's true right now. There are several areas we are studying, but right now there is not, through that time frame, Dr. Worcester is mentioned an acquisition plan.
Okay, so if I think of this in terms of assigned and unassigned fund balance, if you will, for lack of a better word, we right now don't have other things targeted and other money that feel like we need to carve and set aside for anything more pressing.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So Fort Shoals expansion, when is that on the facilities plan to be expanded?
Robert, do you have a financial spreadsheet pulled up? You may be able to find it quicker by looking on there.
You're right, yeah. And I guess I'm just trying to get to this wasn't on my radar, so to speak, I guess, until this item was put on the agenda. So I'm trying to make sure I have all the understanding that I need to make a decision.
I almost hate to venture a guess, but I was thinking 2023 or 24, but that might be off.
It's to be completed in the fall or spring of 26
I'm sorry, spring of 26 for completion.
For the coming fall,
Completion in 26, occupancy fall of 26.
27.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
So we're looking 5 years out for the expansion. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah. That'd probably line up with probably construction start 5 years.
Okay. Well, I too have some concerns with some of the unknowns. I know the real estate market's a little bit crazy. I would have liked to have had more readily available answers to some of the questions we asked, but maybe that's just a bump in the road and a lesson learned. I don't know that I think it's hard to say whether or not properties are going for just appraised value right now. But I'm supportive of Dr. O'Connor and her concerns about wanting more time and needing more information. So, it's kind of a conundrum. I don't believe that this board should be put in a position to not be able to get their answers to the questions that they have. And I think generally the administration always is very sensitive to that. And I think they were in this case too. So I guess I'll hear more discussion and figure out what I want to do there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Mr. Sailors.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have listened to the conversation and feel very confident in the information that's been presented, and I have full faith in the administration. So I feel that the direction that this recommendation is solid. I would like to know, Dr. Royster, if I could, the last several pieces of property that we have purchased, have they all been underappraised, above appraised? Can you share with us if this action is outside the norm of how we normally handle our property acquisitions?
It is in line with some of the property we've acquired. The most recent, I believe if I recall correctly, the most recent piece of property we acquired related to the Fountain Inn site was acquired above the appraised value. We have in some instances been able to acquire property slightly below the appraised value. We try to stay, as you all know, particularly board members have been on the board for a good while, that whether it's acquisition of property or sale of property, we try to stay within a reasonable distance of the appraised value. Unfortunately, in this case, there was a fairly wide variance in the appraisals we received, and I think that entirely has to do with the comps that were utilized by the different appraisers. I think the point's already been made that this particular piece of property, we'd have actually over the next 18 years about $100,000 expense going forward in the lease. So I think you take that into account. You take into account to the point earlier made about the expansion of Fort Shoals in the construction 23, 24 to 26 time frame. It provides some other options as to the expansion of the building. Taking into account all those things, also realizing there's a small section of this property, about 4 acres of the 25, that pretty restricted in its use because it has our septic field on it right now and a long-term lease on that. We believe that all things considered, it's in the best interest of the district to proceed with the acquisition. Whether the board needs or desires additional information or not, it would still be our recommendation that we move forward with the acquisition of the property, whether that's after additional information or without additional information. We think it's in the best interest of the district to purchase the property while it's offered to us for sale by the current owner.
If the current owner cannot meet a resolution with us, they have stated that they would be more than willing to go elsewhere?
Yes, sir. I think they made it very clear their intent is to develop the property.
So let's pretend for a moment they do sell it to someone else, and there's roughly 20 acres, if you will, that could be developed.
Yes, sir.
And then let's go to 2025 and we need more land to expand this school. We're either going to be held hostage then to hypothetically, a higher price per acre then, because a new owner wants to appreciate their investment, or that land could have hypothetically been developed, and if we need more than 4 acres, which we're currently using, there's not going to be the land to purchase. Those are two potential issues.
Yes, sir. The most worrisome would be the need to expand the septic field if we add on to the building, even if we stay within the current footprint of our existing property.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Meek.
Thank you. Let me see how to correctly word this. Dr. Royster, we have a lease for that 4 acres for the next 18 years, how much are we paying per year for that lease?
Mr. Webb, is 5,000 some odd dollars?
5,277, I believe.
With an inflation indexed escalator per year.
So over the next 18 years, that'd be about how much money?
About $90,000 to $95,000 estimate.
That we will be paying out anyway. Is that
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so looking at that and looking at the price, the asking price, if we take that $90-some thousand off of that, then that makes the property very cheap, way under the lowest estimate that we have received. And we're going to be spending that regardless.
Without acquiring the property, yes, sir.
What does that mean?
Okay.
Without acquiring?
We wouldn't own the
When
property.
I had looked at this property, I too had great concern that maybe we were paying too much for this property. So I took it up on myself yesterday to go to Fort Shows Elementary and to walk this property with my little sidekick. And we looked, and the property is much better than what I had thought it was from just the visits to Fort Show. The property, to me, is probably much valued, and I think that, I'm not a real estate appraisal, I'm not a real estate agent, but I have bought a few properties in my life, and I know that when a seller tells you, this is my price, I'm not taking a dime less, then that either you take the property or you walk. And so I think that is our decision tonight. We either take what that property is being offered to us for, or we walk away from it and we let the future boards suffer the consequences when we know we're going to expand that building. We know we're going to use part of that property. We may use all of it. I know the property out back can be used greatly for sports or whatever those students at the elementary school may want to use that. If my math is close to right, and someone referred to it earlier, I think it's only, or is, maybe $500 an acre difference. I've sat on this board for 25 years, and I know we have paid tremendous tremendous prices for property that was way over the appraisal, because we were either accept what the seller was requesting or we were going to walk. And I think wisely we have, in most instances, have accepted that offer, and we have come out ahead many, many times. So I cannot vote for this substitute motion as it's stated either.
I'll look briefly at those numbers, Mr. Meek, to your earlier point. It does, in fact, when you consider we would not make that 18-year payment, it actually brings the amount below the lowest appraised value.
Thank you.
If you deduct out that amount without adjusting for inflation.
Ms. Wells.
Thank you. Another question related to the facility. Did we project that we were going to need to purchase additional land for the Fort Shoals addition? Is that included in the facilities plan? Or, I know they came,
At this point, I don't believe there's any projection for the purchase of additional property, particularly related to that expansion. But we ended up, as you may recall, most recently, we purchased some additional property for the Summit Drive expansion beyond what we originally anticipated, really having primarily to do with traffic flow around the school. And after the design firm looked at it and SCDOT weighed in, we believed that we could, by purchasing that additional piece of property, better direct the flow of traffic for the new addition. So that always can happen in any expansion, that there might be the need
after we engage an A&E firm to perhaps acquire some additional property.
Okay, but as part of this process, we didn't do any preliminary layout to look at any of that, right?
We did not. If there's one that currently exists, there might be, but we didn't do anything particularly related to this.
Okay.
You're correct.
So if this property, in terms of what's usable, is substantially reduced because of whether it's utility easements or whether it's wetlands impacts, do we feel confident that it still would provide the access that we need, that would provide that benefit for us? If you haven't done any layout and we haven't done any kind of delineation to look for environmental restrictions.
When you look at the layout of the property, the part that would be most conducive to our purposes, I believe, is a part far remote from those considerations.
Okay. Okay. And are there any other special conditions in the contract that we could talk about here with regard to the purchase? Or is when we make this, I guess I'm trying to figure out the next step, when we make this motion, we say, yes, that's all it has to be. There aren't any other things in play that need to happen, inspection-wise or permitting-wise or any due diligence kind of stuff? Is this?
Carlin.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other, Mr. Meek?
Said that so nicely. Dr. Royster, we recently purchased, and I've forgotten, some property over at Summit Drive.
Yes, sir.
How many acres did we purchase?
Ms. Fitzer, can you look that up in the record real quickly?
Well, my next question is, how much do we pay for that? How much acreage did we purchase at Summit Drive, and what did we pay for it?
It was 0.42 acres, and price was $197,000.
That was less than an acre. And I realize, and I've heard all my life, and I believe it, the three most important words to a realtor is location, location, and location. And although this was in the city, over at Summit Drive, I guess it's in the city, this is way out in the country. The property is the property. It is what it is. And that was the price. I don't know what the evaluation was, but that was a good chunk of cash that we paid for less than an acre. Thank you.
Dr. Ballentine.
Yeah, may I ask a question to Mr. Webb about what I'm allowed to say here?
Yes.
I would like to be able to say how much over, what percentage over the price we are preparing to pay as part of the explanation of why I think it's unfair that we're being pushed into this without being able to get a little bit more information. Is that okay to say?
You already said.
Yes.
No, the percentage.
Yeah, percentage would.
So I want to say that for me, it seems that
Over the highest percentage.
it is
Over the highest.
irresponsible of me if I don't know if I'm paying 41% over the appraised value or 8% over the appraised value, because we had two that were so far apart. And so in addition to that, we've talked about several things that we don't know if the appraisers took these very critical things into account, including those on the administration who looked at it regarding the 18-year lease. So I just want to say that I certainly, there is no implication that when you have questions as a trustee, that it means that you don't have full confidence in the administration. There's no question of that. The question is, I don't have full confidence in the information that I have, that it is sufficient information to expend taxpayer money, and that's the role that I have to play. So I just don't like not, sort of getting boxed in without being able to have a public discussion about why. These are not arbitrary gaps in information, but significant ones to some of us. So I'm offering a compromise of a way to go forward, but I think the right thing for me to do is just to vote no, because I don't have enough information. And I want to say to my colleagues that you never see me calling the question, because I believe that is a political tool to get people to stop making their voice heard. Some people use that tool. That's up to them. I don't use that because I believe I want every trustee to be able to say what they think and fully contribute to any discussion. And I felt like with many of us saying we don't have enough information, could we please wait for 2 more weeks? And now we've come out and had a motion to the contrary. It just feels like a squeeze that I'm not prepared to go without calling. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ball O'Connor. Yes, Mr. Meek.
I didn't call the question. I don't know who she's talking to. But anyway.
No, that's not what I'm...
Okay.
Please, no discussion. Just, Mr. Meek, you have the floor.
I was just going to say, that Fork Shows is in my area now.
Yes.
And I sort of feel obligated to make the point that, it's real difficult to express to, some of my constituents why this board would pay close to $200,000 for less than an acre when we're looking at paying.
Please do not disclose.
I shouldn't say the amount,
Thank you.
but paying
Thank you.
close to the same amount for 25 acres. I mean, that does not make logical sense. And believe me that I, along with most of the members, or all the members on this board, want to spend, and I think we do spend the taxpayers' monies very wisely. And I'm sorry that some board members don't have enough information to vote on this, but there's a lot of times I have to vote no because I don't feel that I have as much information to feel comfortable with it. And all I can say is vote your conscience tonight, and if the chips fall one way, then that's the way they fall. Thank you.
Yes, there's a substitute motion on the screen to approve the purchase of 24.956 acres, but not pay anything greater than the higher of the 2 appraisals obtained by the district. And I did that without my glasses. Mr. Lewis.
So just a clarifying question. So should the board vote no to this and this not pass, then we would revert back to the original motion.
Yes, sir. That's correct. Ms. Glenda Marson-Fair.
I would like also another clarification. If this motion passes, are we to assume that we will have additional information in order to make a decision whether or not we will pay anything greater than the higher of the 2 appraisals?
Mr. Webb may want to weigh in on that, but I would take that in the direction of the administration was to make an offer in that amount. That would be the offer.
Not to exceed the highest appraisal.
Okay, so that motion directs our realtors to go back and make a different offer.
That's right, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And let me clarify one thing. The question was asked earlier about amount remaining in the site budget. It's actually $760,000.
$769,000.
$760,000.
$60,000.
But let me.
That's correct, isn't it, Ron?
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Webb.
And one way to interpret this motion, which I think is a reasonable way to do it, would be that you approve the purchase of this property, and if the administration is able to get the seller to sell the property for something at the highest appraisal or lower, then to move forward without even bringing it back for another board action. So that is something to consider and how to interpret this motion.
Yes. Mr. are you finished? Mr. Shamley? Is your mic on, please?
Mr. Webb, you can confirm, I'm trying not to, if I'm correct or not, but if this motion passes, we will have officially rejected the offer. They are then free to do anything they want to with the property. They may have another buyer out there ready to pay them that amount or more. We don't know. The only thing I'm saying is that there is at least that risk there. Am I correct? Or
It is possible.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Ms. Bush?
Yeah, well, my concern with supporting this motion is that the information that we have asked for, we're basing it on what we're not sure is correct information.
I agree.
So we're back in the same position again because it could come back for the information significantly more where everybody would feel comfortable. And Dr. Royster had said he didn't have a problem that 2 weeks was not too long, but of course the barn door's already open, so we're already past that. So, but I don't think I can support this because I'm basically supporting it off of information that we're not sure, that we all have concerns about being such a wide range and what those factors were, whether certain factors were used in the which probably has something to do with why we had 2 such wide appraisals in there. So I don't think I'm going to be able to support this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Cristobal O'Connor.
Yes, may I ask a sort of a parliamentary question? Because I really agree with Ms. Bush. This is like second best hope. It's not a perfect situation. The perfect situation is to get the information we needed. Is there a way that this could be modified or, voted down and another substitute made, even though a version of that was voted down by only 1 vote? We've had more discussion. Perhaps if colleagues realize we're just simply trying to get the answers to the questions, is there a way that it could be, someone else could come in with a different motion that was a slight variation and it would still be a legitimate consideration?
I think it depends on how much of a variation, but I think it is important to remember that there was a vote on the first motion, which failed, and we're on this one now. So if something was brought that is substantially the same as the first one, then I would say it would be out of order, unless it was from someone who voted against it, who brings it, then that is a possibility.
As a move to reconsider.
As a move
or,
to
or
reconsider.
something significantly different.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve the purchase of the 24,956 acres, but not 24,000.956 acres, but not pay anything greater than the higher of the 2 appraisals obtained by the district. This was made by Dr. O'Connor and seconded by Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. We are going to vote on this.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Mrs. Bush?
No.
Mr. Shamley?
No.
Mrs. Goodwin Caldwell?
No.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Meek?
No.
Mrs. Morrison Fair?
Yes.
Dr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Sailors?
No.
Mr. Suddeth?
No.
Mrs. Wells?
No.
Mrs. Levinas Wells?
No.
9-2 no.
The motion fails. So we are back to the original motion. If I can see, well, I think I have it. The recommended motion is to approve the purchase of 24.956 acres as depicted in the survey dated July 1st, 2019 for Fort Shoals School. And there was a second. Could you tell me who the second was? The maker was Mr. Meek, and the second was Mr. Sailors. Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
I had my
Oh,
hand
you had
up.
your hand up?
Yeah.
My apologies.
That's okay.
Dr. Cristobal
That's okay.
O'Connor.
If the motion fails,
If this motion fails.
then are we allowed, I mean, how do you get it back to the possibility of getting more information in 2 weeks and voting again, as opposed to if you vote no and the motion should fail, then it just is a rejection of the offer, right? Whereas if we could get the information and increase the number potentially who could get comfortable with making the purchase, we're not losing anything by waiting. Is that correct?
That's correct. But there would have to be, if this should fail, then there could possibly be another substitute or another motion, since this would be a failed motion. We could do another motion. I'm going to ask council, what's your opinion on this one? Because we've had a bunch of motions.
No, if it were to fail, then the agenda item would move on from that on the agenda. That would for this evening it would move on.
Okay, so it would be removed from the agenda. Okay, so Ms. Wells.
So this is voted down. If it were voted down, then there's what does the administration? How do you interpret the motion if you vote this down, understanding the conversation that's been behind it?
For Dr. Royster on that.
At this point, we don't acquire the property.
So you stop working on any sort of resolution or any additional negotiation on the property?
We'd have to confer and decide what our recommendation would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Now
sorry.
it's-
We'd have to confer and decide at that point what our recommendation might be.
Okay. It doesn't, I mean, given that we didn't take board action for you to enter into any negotiations and bring us a contract, so I wouldn't believe that just voting to not agree to these contract terms would mean that you would not, that it would bring a halt to any consideration of property acquisition.
It's still our belief that we need to acquire the property.
Right. Okay.
Without speculation,
There you go.
we need to go ahead and take the vote. So, Mr. Suddeth, you have a question?
Why don't we vote to see where it's yes or no?
That's what we're going to do. That's
a good idea.
That's what I'm going to do.
With all due respect, I want to understand if I vote yes or no, what that might or might not. I can't decide how I want to vote
But we
if I don't
can't
know what's going to
speculate.
happen.
There's no way to speculate. We just have to vote. Ms. Michelle Goodwin-Caldwell.
And so the due diligence isn't up until after October the 8th. So why shouldn't
it depends on the vote, Ms. Caldwell.
No, but I'm saying that, I mean, even if we have those 2 weeks deferring to October the 8th, we still have time on the contract, is what I'm saying.
That's correct.
So, I mean, if we're asking for the extra information that they did not have to do these appraisals,
Yes.
we should give them that time so that we have the full information.
Right.
So we can make an informed decision.
That's correct.
I don't like being pushed into a vote either if we don't have all of the information.
Okay.
You know, I would love for us to have that property, but if he did not have all of the information he needed to do a thorough appraisal, then, you know, I think that we need the information. That's all we're asking for. We're not saying that we don't want to purchase the property.
Right.
We just want all of the information.
Yes, ma'am. Anybody else? I want everybody happy. Okay. Roll call.
Ms. Bush?
No.
Mr. Shamley?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin-Caldwell?
No.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Meek?
Yes.
Mrs. Morrison Fair?
No.
Dr. O'Connor?
No.
Mr. Sailors?
Yes.
Mr. Suddeth?
Yes.
Ms. Wells?
Nope.
Levinus Wells?
Yes.
Six, five, yes.
The motion carries.
Excuse me.
Yes,
Is,
ma'am?
is there a difference in the kind of majority you need if it's over a certain amount of money, or does it matter?
No.
Yes, sir. Okay,
The
so
price.
at this time, the recommended motion from the administration and the board to approve the purchase of 24.956 acres as depicted in the survey dated July 1st, 2019 for Fort Shoals School will be sold at $243,321. Okay? That is what the district will pay. At this time, we will move to 5.03, Audit of Education Finance Act Student Classification. There's a recommended motion from Internal Auditor Services, and I will turn this over to Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
We performed this audit to ensure that students were properly classified in the Power School system in order to receive maximum Education Finance Act funding. The audit period covered August 20th, 2018 through March 26, 2019, and included a review of special education classification data and Power School data for 1,572 students at 11 district locations. For each location, we ensured that EFA classifications were correct. For any errors, we ensured that corrections were made prior to the 135th attendance day. The report consists of one observation. For special education student classifications reviewed, overclaims of $364.07 and underclaims of $1,282.67 were noted. These discrepancies would have resulted in a net underclaim of $918.60. As stated, all the errors noted were corrected prior to the 135th day of attendance. In addition, it should be noted that significant improvement has been made in the process of ensuring student classifications documented in IEPs are appropriately communicated to attendance clerks. Our recommendation is special education services should continue to monitor EFA classifications in Power School and communicate the proper information to school clerks.
So are there any questions for Mr. Barber? I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to accept the audit.
To accept the audit of EFA student classifications. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments? All in favor, please address by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion to accept the audit of EFA student classification has been passed. Thank you, Mr. Barber. But before I go to the next 6.01, I just want to thank the students from Furman University for being here tonight. I know you might be getting a little tired, and I know you've got some exams, so I just wanted to recognize you. If you would stand up, please. We appreciate you being here. Didn't want you to go unnoticed. Thank you so much. Thank you. 6.01 Internal Auditing Services Project Status Report. Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We're presenting our monthly project status report disclosing information on our projects that we're currently working on. We've also included an additional worksheet to provide a time summary of the status of current projects, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Barber? Thank you. It was information only. Thank you so much, Mr. Barber. At this point, 6.02, proposed cell tower leases at Berea and Southside High School. I will turn this over to Mr. Royster.
Thank you, Ms. Venice-Wells. Let me draw you back in time a little bit. About 5 years ago, in 2014, the district issued an RFP for competitive bid from companies that could install communications towers at locations desirable to carriers and would ultimately generate revenue for the district. Well, it's been a long time coming, but we now have 2 potential sites that are very close to final approval. And instead of, as we would ordinarily do with a contractual matter, bring it directly to the board, because these are the first ones actually coming to you for approval, we wanted to do a little presentation tonight, and really it's what we're doing in lieu of the superintendent's report, though you'll have the opportunity certainly to ask questions of Mr. Farkas from Milestone, or Mr. Carlin, or Ms. Stack, or myself, or Mr. Webb, or anyone involved in the process. We likely will come to you at the special call meeting at the CAL with an approval for a contract. We wanted you to have the information, have time tonight to see it, to ask some questions, and then if you have questions that occur to you after the presentation, time to get the answers for that before it comes time to vote on it. Again, particularly because this is the first group to come through, and there are 2 sites, Berea and Southside. Milestone has everything they need as far as discretionary permits. That is, permits that could be denied that would prevent the construction. They still have some permitting going forward. Those are primarily county building type permits that they are not discretionary. They have to be issued when Milestone has met the conditions of the permit. But there has been a slight change to the contract in order for us to move this forward, not having those permits in place. Mr. Farkas has proposed to us to amend the contract a little bit so that should anything happen in that permitting process, we will receive the stated amount in the contract as if the permits went through. It's basically an act of good faith to reassure us that that permitting process will move forward. But I'll turn it over now to Mr. Farkas, and I ask him to present the information related to the 2 towers at Berea and Southside. Mr. Farkas?
Great. Thank you, Dr. President. Members of the board, my name is Len Farkas. I'm the president and owner of Milestone Communications. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you the information regarding these 2 applications. But just very briefly, we have been in business for 20 years. We've built over 150 towers in partnership with schools, municipalities in over 6 different states. We have a very strong footprint in the Carolinas, in both Charleston, Greenville, Richland, and Pickens County. We believe that the towers built on municipal sites are good locations because they're large sites and we have the ability to be able to mitigate the visual impact. As Dr. Royster had mentioned, we won a competitive procurement to be able to partner with you back in 2014. It's taken us a few years, but we finally have 2 sites that are almost shovel ready and have been through all the processes necessary through the county, the Board of Zoning Appeals. In a nutshell, we have 2 choices for you. These don't need to be made tonight, but they're choices to either receive, effectively our contract allows for 40% of the gross revenue from the tower to be paid to the schools. For every dollar we collect, 40% goes to the schools. Plus we pay a $25,000 site access fee, and for every additional carrier after the first carrier, an additional $5,000 per carrier. Or the board can choose to accept $100,000, which represents the first 10 years of the first carrier. If we have immediate needs to use the resources. Same identical deal, it's just effectively we fast forward all of the rent over a 10-year period at your discretion. These are photographs, examples of the work that we do. We build towers on municipal sites in places where they tend to blend in near the athletic fields. The first site I'd like to share with you is Southside High School. The location that was selected by your staff, your team, was located to the southeast of the property in a wooded area. This is a 130-foot tall monopole. Verizon is our primary carrier with a 50 by 50 fenced-in area. We filed for the application. We held community meetings after a thorough public process. We were approved unanimously by the board on May 8th of this year. This just gives you an indication of what the tower would look like. We flew a balloon and we took photographs from different locations to photo simulate what the tower would look like after it's constructed. These give you an indication. They're taken from different locations throughout around the property. And again, this is what the tower will look like. The next tower is Berea High School. The tower location that was selected by staff was proximate to the baseball field. Again, this went through identical process to the Board of Zoning Appeals. By the way, these 2 towers will be our second and third tower. We built a tower at the Parks and Rec headquarters office. We have a very similar partnership with Greenville County Government. Same process, Board of Zoning Appeals, we met with staff, we received notification of approval. We built a website with the information on the website, notified the community, held town hall meetings, and then again was unanimously approved on June 12th of this year. This is again 125-foot tall monopole next to the baseball field, approximate to the football field. It's in a location where there are other existing tall poles. So this again gives you an indication of what the tower will look like. This blends in very nicely because of its proximity to the football field. And again, we'll serve this site will serve AT&T as the lead carrier. The next steps are we are within days of obtaining final approval for this high school, the Berea High School site, and should be able to start construction in November. And then the south side property, we should be able to obtain approvals in November. I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding these applications, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present them to you.
Thank you, Mr. Portis. Any questions? Yes, Mrs. Michelle Goodwin-Caldwell.
Okay, I'm looking at the photos that you have here, and they're kind of a little different from the photos that you had at the community meeting for the South Side proposed site. Did that site change from whenever you did it at the community meeting? Because I'm looking with me looking at the photos, it looks like that it was supposed to be in the wooded area closer to the road, but it's looking like it's closer to the school now. So did that site change from when you did it back in September of 2018?
The only part that changed was the access. Originally, the access point was intended to be off of a different road, but after an environmental evaluation, it was determined that the impact to the wetlands and the floodplain area was too great of an environmental impact. So we relocated the access way from a place that would have a smaller amount of visual and physical impact to the environment.
So that's the only thing that changed was the access way. Where you were situating the pole is the same place?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I wanted to ask what kind of revenue is Southside High School going to be able to receive from this? Because I was told back in September of 2018 that the school would see some kind of revenue from this also. So I would like to know that.
That's a district decision. So Mr. Farkas laid out for you what the two types of revenue streams are. And so what Mr. Webb is passing along to you is what we believe is the one that is in the best interest of the district between the two choices. And it shows how we propose to divide that between the school and the district. So you'll see a sheet that shows a total revenue column, revenue received when the agreement is signed of $25,000, carrier added to tower, so each time a carrier is added, that's $5,000, carrier lease, we believe the better option for the district is to take the money up front instead of over time, which is a total revenue of $130,000. And in our recommendation, when we have a contract, would be for $75,000 to come to the school and $55,000 to come to the district.
Okay, why would you choose that one instead of 40% of gross from the tower leases? What is the amount of the leases? I need to know this information if it would be more than the $100,000. If it's 40% of the gross revenues from the tower leases, if it's over $100,000, why would you choose that?
It is over $100,000, and I believe it breaks out to about $4,500 a year. Is that right, Ms. Stack?
Yes, sir.
And the reason we chose that is not knowing what that environment might look like going forward. We believed it was in the better interest of the school and the district to take the slightly lesser amount, but take it up front. The school realizes a larger amount right off the bat instead of having to get money over time.
Okay, I'm trying to understand this. The one-time advance of $100,000
Yes.
is representing the lease payments for 10 years for each carrier. You're starting out with one carrier on the pole. So if you have 5 carriers on the pole, that's more money. Why would you take the $100,000?
No, this would be the scenario per carrier.
So you would get $100,000 each for
Yes, ma'am.
each
As
carrier.
opposed to taking the breakout over time, you get $100,000 for each carrier, broken out a total of $130,000, broken out 75-55 between the school and the district.
Okay, still have some questions, but I'll get with you later on that about the money situation. But I also wanted to know, you only have sites on the south side and west side. Did you try to see about sites on the east side, north side? I only see them on the south side and west side. And I know that that community over in south side did not want this in their area. So I know I'm going to have some questions. Why is it located only on the south side and west side of the county?
Well, I can say that we have a great incentive to proactively market every single school site that would be willing to mirror the tower. And so we don't choose locations. These are chosen by companies like AT&T anticipate that there will be a relatively equal aggregation of future sites. In all of our other partnerships, of which we have 50 other partnerships, there's no geographic preference. It's really just based on the quality of their network in the Greenville area where your sites are located. So we have every incentive to bring as many sites as we can to you for your consideration throughout the school system. We don't have a preference for one over the other.
Lynn, I don't recall the two sites, but I do recall one of the two that you mentioned earlier, which is within your agreement with the county, which is on the east side. It's right there on just beyond Mitchell Road Elementary School at the county rec headquarters. Isn't that where that site is?
Yeah, we built the tower at the county rec headquarters, and right now we're just obtaining approval for the Energy Recycling Center, which is another location that was just selected by Verizon.
Well,
That site you're talking about is about a half mile.
Have you
from
already,
Russian Creek.
have you approached any of the schools on the east side or north side
Well,
about cell towers like these for Southside and Berea?
Yeah, so again, we react to what our customers tell us as to where they want to invest in infrastructure for new sites. So we do our very best to make available to them all the locations that staff has approved. So we're very motivated to develop sites throughout the school system, but it's not our decision as to which locations. It's based on the engineers of the wireless companies that are seeking to invest based on their network. So each site's a snowflake. Every network is different, and they all have different characteristics based on where the current towers are located and when they're going to invest for the future. So, but all I can tell you is that we have absolutely no preference whatsoever as to which sites they pick. We want to make available all the sites that you've agreed to allow us to market.
Okay, I still have some questions, but that's all for right now.
Is that all?
That's all for right now.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Dr. Cristobal O'Connor.
May I ask Dr. Royster if this split, 75 for the school and 55 for the district, is that something that we've talked about and that is settled, or is this sort of just a
That's something
suggestion at this
that we would bring to you as a recommendation.
And so if I'm imagining, you fast forward and you think that potentially one day all high schools, let's say, would be asked or marketed to or whatever, and then you would equalize this opportunity, and then if that were the situation, then everybody would get about the same thing, right? Although
if we adopted this and we continued it forward, yes.
Right. So I guess I would just say that because it is Southside, and Southside's needs are greater than most of our high schools, I wonder if there's a proportion that could be considered based on the needs of the students in the school rather than just a split that is fixed for all schools. Is that?
Actually, we set this be taking into consideration the physical ability of those two schools. It's Berea and Southside. They're two schools, not just one. That was what caused us to come forward with $75,000 for the school, as opposed to say like a 50-50 split.
Okay. So it could have been a different recommendation if the school was perceived as having different financial advantages in their communities, for example. That split could change depending on the school, is what you're saying.
It could, but it puts you in a difficult position to change it, but we set it based on the needs of those two schools.
Okay.
In the grand scheme of things for the district, not a huge amount of money. In the grand scheme of things for those schools, it is a very large amount of money that would allow them, I think, to do some things that they otherwise don't have the ability to do. Now, in future recommendations, we might consider the ability, so to speak, of the local school The other thing we don't yet know what's the potential to have these down the road and how many schools might have them. And should we look at splits out to schools besides the school where the tower is located? But then you don't want to do that if 6 months later you put a tower on that school site.
Okay.
So that's something for us to look at down the road. This is really kind of our first run at this. But when we looked at the numbers and discussed them, we felt, and I felt very strongly, that because of the communities these two schools serve, that this was a more appropriate split for them.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Bush?
Do we have any other cell towers on any of our properties?
We have one at Serene Stadium, and I'm not sure of any others. There could be. We'll check and see and get you the answer to that. But I know there's one at Serene right behind the home stand.
Yeah. I remember that one going up at Serene Stadium, because I remember us having this same discussion about whether the money would go to Greenville High School or whether it would come to the school district. And
I'd have to go back and put, we'll do that too, so you'll have that background information.
Yes,
We'll see what
like
that split was.
because I remember there was.
I believe that was maybe 15 or 20 years ago, was it? I don't recall it being done. I know it's there, so it may be more than 15 years ago.
Yeah.
We'll
and see what revenue we've gotten off of that and where how that was
don't believe it was quite as lucrative as this.
No, but I remember there being great discussion about whether it went to the school or whether it came to the district.
Well, I think we view this as an opportunity to help bolster the activity funds of those schools.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? No questions? Okay, thank you for your information. Thank you for your presentation, and I hope you have a nice evening. At this point, we'll go to 7.01, Committee and Liaison Reports. And I will ask Mr. Lewis, Advocacy.
Madam Chairman, the Advocacy Committee met today, and just want to remind the board about an upcoming event. On October the 22nd at J.L. Mann, there will be a lunch served, and this will be our invitation to the legislative delegation to come to J.L. Mann and have a conversation about education policy, specifically around Senate Bill 419 and our perspectives and responses to that bill. I sent out the talking points to that by email through Nancy on August the 28th, and then a hard copy is on your desk. So in the interest of time, I won't read over them except to say that all the items that are bolded are items the board has already approved. And the bulleted items beneath it are just further context that relates the items the board has approved to the actual language that's in the bill. So there shouldn't be anything new. The board has already seen this in the spring, and then again it was emailed out in August for the board to provide comment. No board members provided any additional comment, and so the Advocacy Committee is presenting this content for information only. The intent is that agenda for that meeting will involve the superintendent talking and providing a superintendent's report in the same way that he has done at the principal breakfasts. And then then we will kind of go through these talking points as our kind of meat of the section to kind of speak to the legislators about school board related issues. And then the third item on the agenda would be to invite one of the members of the legislative delegation to give us an update on some of the bills or pending items that they think might be of interest to us. So it's really just an opportunity to use these more to provide content back and forth than to provide a presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions, although this item is being presented for information only.
Okay. Dr. Cristobal O'Connor?
Yes. May I ask Mr. Lewis if you would help clarify one thing for me? We often hear and focus on and understand how important it is to teachers and others that we don't have so much time going to testing. But what I want to ask you is if you can help me understand, when I looked over it and it talked about, other than what's required by ESSA or what's not required by the state, et cetera. I'm a little bit confused about it, but I think from all the discussion we've had on the board, one interest I have is making sure that we continue to have tests that allow us to measure ourselves against those other than the state, let's say in norm reference tests, for example. Can you tell me how those kinds of tests, if at all, would be addressed in this bullet item?
Yeah, so I guess the thing I would clarify is our resolution is that we would allow districts the flexibility to opt out of all state mandated testing that's not required by federal law. Does not necessarily take the position that the Greenville School Board is crossing out those tests. It's really just saying that we believe that school districts should have the opportunity, if they choose to opt out of those tests. I don't know that I'm comfortable to speak on behalf of that committee on which test we would recommend we opt out of or not. The only one that we specifically named was the KRA, because this district currently uses the kindergarten readiness assessment, the KRA, and FastBridge, and we have already advocated that FastBridge should replace the KRA because it is a much less staff time intensive assessment and produces immediate results rather than 6 months later results. Other than the KRA, we have not named any tests or had any discussions about which we would opt out of or which we would keep. It just, we believe, kind of goes in line with local control and that local districts should have the ability to opt out if they choose to.
Okay, so let me, if I can ask if Jeff McCoy were in here, he's not, I know why, because I wasn't expecting that, but may I ask Dr.
Sure,
Royster?
I'll make a run at answering.
Make a run.
Mr. McCoy, Dr. McDavid, and Mr. Reimer, and Mrs. Hogan are all out of town at a particular conference where they were presenting.
Awesome.
But I think they might be actually on their way back right now.
That's great. Okay, so Mr. Lewis, if you don't mind my switching over to the administration for just a minute to ask, what is, if it says allow districts to opt out of testing mandated by the state and not required by ESSA, we talk about those tests in here all the time, and which ones we do and don't. Is SC ready? Anything that we could opt out of?
I'm going to call on Dr. McCreary to make sure that I'm saying this correctly. The federal requirement is math and English at every grade from 3rd through 8th, and then a certain number of end-of-course tests in high school, one in English, one in math, one in science, and one in, social studies is not required even at the high school level, is it? So there is a high school end-of-course in U.S. history that would not be required. You have to do a science or math, science or social studies, how often at 3 through 8, Jason?
One in each level, so one in elementary and one in middle school.
And I believe we're exceeding that by maybe twice that amount. So you're required to do English and math 3 through 8 every year.
Everyone is required in the state.
Yeah, by federal requirement, everyone, yes. And by federal requirement, 3 end of course at the high school level. Our state requires 4. And our state is requiring KRA, which provides no information, usable information back to us.
I can remember that KRA discussion, but I just couldn't remember which tests were. This wouldn't affect if you did map testing, because that's what we decide on our own to do, right?
That is correct. The other one that the state requires, that isn't required by the federal government, but the state requires it for the purpose of identification of gifted and talented, would be the testing at the 2nd grade level.
Iowa,
our current one's Iowa, COGAT. So that's a state requirement, but to meet an identification requirement for gifted and talented. So that's not a federal requirement. Did I leave one out, Jason, that's a state but not a federal? Thank you.
So just as that's one good example, is what would happen if a district said, we're not going to do COGAT in Iowa for our 2nd graders, and then they weren't able to identify challenge students.
Then they wouldn't be able to draw state funding for gifted and talented students. And I think there's probably a regulatory requirement you have to gifted and talented program, but I'd have to look at the specific regulation.
So there'd be an incentive, a financial incentive for them to keep doing that one.
No, there'd be a programmatic incentive, what's the best interest of students incentive, and then, then a financial incentive.
The financial being any additional money they'd get for challenge, right?
Yes.
So, anyway, I just wanted to understand it because I know that you guys are putting a lot of work into it, and anytime I see, being able to opt out, I want to really understand what we're opting out of so that we don't inadvertently let go of something that really tells us where we are in important ways, as we've discussed on this board, to say, gosh, we want to know not just how we're doing here, but in comparison to benchmark districts, in comparison to the nation, etc. And we try to add those additional things because we think it gives us a better read than some of the state mandated tests, I guess. But I just imagine that we are ahead of a lot of districts in the information we collect and what we do with it. And I just would not really fully understand what it would mean for a district that is not as strong as Greenville to be able to opt out of state mandated testing. Just help me understand, Mr. Lewis, if that's appropriate to ask, what the conversation was about why School Boards Association is thinking that would be better for students. Is it just about the instructional time they lose, or do they believe they have enough other tests in place if they did that to still diagnostically respond?
So I would not be able to answer how the School Board Association feels about this, because this resolution number 3, to allow high-performing districts the flexibility to opt out of all state-mandated tests not required by federal law, was passed by this board in March. So this is just a repeat of a resolution this board it's already passed.
So when you say this board, do you mean our
The
board,
Greenville County
not
School Board
South
passed
Carolina
that
School Board?
resolution
Okay.
in March, and we are just repeating it as a talking point that we're going to use. I think the thing that all of these resolutions really come down to is local control. And I think what we are trying to do is give specific examples of where the General Assembly perhaps is forgetting that local school boards are more effective at running local school districts than the State Department of Ed or than the General Assembly is. And so we're reminding them of specific examples of where, if we had more local control, we might make different decisions than the General Assembly is making. But I would not be comfortable saying here or in that meeting what specific things we as a board would get rid of, because we've never had that discussion, or what I think other people should be getting rid of. I remember when this resolution was originally written, it was about the amount of time that teachers have said we're spending testing students unnecessarily. And so I think this was a response to that. The one thing I would clarify, though, is there is even confusion between the House Education Committee, the Senate Education Committee, and the Department of Ed about how many tests are mandated by state and federal law. And so there is a substantial disagreement about what is mandated and what is not. And so I think this is really just kind of trying to open that door, not to specifically name any tests that we would recommend that we would do.
Okay, thank you for that. And is there a definition clear on what high-performing districts
No.
are?
We,
As something to be determined.
us, and others.
So if Greenville wants to, yeah, I understand. To be determined. I think.
Yes, ma'am.
No, thank you very much.
Okay.
The only thing I just would repeat to the board before I give up the floor is it's October the 22nd at J.L. Mann High School, and it's at lunch, and it's already on the board calendar. And even if you are not a member of the advocacy committee, we'd still encourage you to come. And if you have a relationship with your legislator, to invite them to come, because I think a personal invitation from you to them may go further than me and Senator Turner inviting them or the superintendent. So we encourage everybody to attend, and we look forward to a good discussion. There was also a discussion at the advocacy committee meeting about some possible legislative action that is working to make it easier for the State Department of Ed and the superintendent to take over local school boards. And at this time, we are just having discussions about these discussions that are happening in Columbia. There is no specific action that we would recommend this board take at this time, except to hear at this meeting what our delegation thinks about that action. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Meek?
Yes, ma'am. The Ad hoc Committee on Personnel Policies met this afternoon, had a lively discussion about the sick leave, and we have no recommendations for the board yet. It'll probably be several months before we do have any recommendations, but we did work quite a lot this afternoon. I think we let the administration know exactly or closely what we'd like to see for them in a couple of months, and I think they've agreed to bring that back to us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Meek. Mr. Sailors?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to thank everybody for participating in the regional advocacy event that was able to come down. We've got one more left, which is tomorrow evening, and look forward to having everybody in Charleston in December. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, 7.01, Finance. Finance report. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Ms. Levinus Wells. I don't believe Ms. Stack has a report tonight, but she is available to respond to any questions that you might have regarding fund balance or anything else.
Mr. Meek, are you into the fund balance tonight?
Not tonight, thank you.
I'd say he's exhausted.
That was just for Jeff.
Only for Jeff.
Keep Jeff straight.
Yes, sir. There's a motion on the floor to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Bush. All in favor, please address by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carries, and we are adjourned. Thank you, and y'all have a nice evening.